Third time's a charm, I hope. Yeah, this will be the third time I try and record this group critique. I think I underestimated how difficult it is and how long it would be, given that I have 72 images to go through. Roughly 1 minute each makes it quite a long video. So I'm gonna go pretty quickly. Coming to you from Anguilla. I used to think it was called Anguilla until I got here. I just shot a destination wedding. It's been a really great trip, and I figured I would try and set up to do the group critique here. And it also gave me the idea to add a new milestone goal for Patreon. I will do a write-up on my approach to booking destination weddings. I do a fair number of them, so I think that might be an interesting one to go through. Other than that, though, I want to dive right in. Just to start by saying, I'm gonna try and be pretty rough and harsh, more than pointing out the good things. Every single photo in here does have good elements behind it, but I think it's just far better use of time to point out exactly what jumped out at me, first gut reaction as being a problem, and what I do to best fix it. And I totally understand that like so many circumstances on the day aren't clear when all I see is the end result photo. I don't know if you could move just a little bit to the right or the left. Most of the issues tend to do with composition, foreground, background stuff, where things aren't perfectly level or weird lines are intercepting people's heads. But I'm gonna jump to the Apple Pencil and try and mark up exactly where those problems are to make it very easy and clear for you, I hope. And I'm gonna do another round of group critique soon. Yeah, but I'll probably do a hard limit of like 60 or something like that to make it a more reasonable time. So I don't blame you if you want to fast forward to just your photo if you're watching this and submit it. But here we go, jumping right in. These aren't in any particular order, they're just the order that are on my iPad. So, all right, starting with this one. Really cool colors. The light is too direct. It seems like it's coming from, you know, like directly overhead, maybe a little bit to the side. I would prefer to see something much more to the side to give it a little more dimension. But that's it. Other than that, as far as the lighting goes, that's the other problem. Now, the biggest issue are these intercepting lines here. You're getting these rectangular boxes that are framing the background really strongly, and those two sides are just completely intercepting with the couple's heads. So that's a problem, no good. I would have tried to frame them further back so that they were right in the like brick area only. So yeah, that is photo number one. Photo number two. I'm a little concerned with where the crop is happening, like right around here. It's not exactly their knees, but especially with outfits this intricate, probably would have been better to do a full body shot. Maybe would crop it closer to this in terms of something that works for me. I like the use of off-camera flash. I assume that's what's going on. The only small subtle thing is these black lines here kind of going through his head in a strange way. It would have been a little nicer to see, you know, him, maybe both of them being more balanced between this space, these trees in the background. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it. Really interesting use of light. I like the composition overall. A little upsetting where you're cutting his knee off, you know, maybe frame it a little tighter, something like this. You've done a really good job with her head not intercepting with these lines. That's really great. The problem is his head and his eyes. His eyes are a big problem. They're just pure black. So he needed to be looking up more into the light, sort of like how you had her doing. This is good, this is bad. All right, really nice job capturing a moment that's generally hard to get in focus. They are sharp, so big check mark for that. All I would say is maybe like 1 or 2 big steps in, or you could just crop it a lot closer, something like this. I know you start to cut limbs off and things, but you know, and you have to balance that with what the couple's probably gonna love. I mean, many couples wanna see like as many guests' faces as possible, even if it's not perfectly composed. They'll appreciate seeing that little girl there, even though compositionally, or technically, I think maybe it would be a little bit stronger cropped in sort of like this. But nice job overall. It's a really tough thing to pull off. But I will say compositionally, you just don't need all this extra, you know, dead space up here. I see how you're trying to frame that. But you did cut off a little bit of the top, so you know, just crop it in tighter. This one's pretty cool, but you know, this row of lights intercepting with his head is a big problem for me. I'm gonna make that yellow just to make it very clear what I'm talking about. This stuff here should not be intercepting with his head as much. That's a big no-no. The lighting is a little inconsistent and uneven. I wish it had been, you can see the shadows on his face. It's a little bit too side lit. I really wish it wasn't quite that strong. But good job kind of framing framing the context with all the guest reactions and stuff like that. I love that, especially for, you know, dancing photos. The other biggest compositional issue is this circle being cut off is a big problem. So I would have probably gone in more tight like that if at all possible. Just get rid of that ball altogether. Nice post-processing, good use of like dynamic range for sure. The only thing that jumps out at me right off the bat is this background line intercepting with his chin and head in a weird way. I would have preferred that to be framed a little bit lower. And then also his expression, I don't really get a clear read on it. And I prefer to see the profile or more of each person in a pose. So she looks great. He's a little off, that's all. I like this use of framing here that like pulls you into looking at them. It's just this big horizon line is anchoring in an awkward spot. Probably would have preferred to have that go through like this section of their bodies. So you clearly tried to recover some of the dynamic range, so good job for trying to recover that. But this banding here, and I don't know, maybe that's just the file quality uploaded, but that's noticeable for me, and that's a problem because of it. I would definitely, if you've blown out your highlights, just let them be overexposed. Just like blow them out, make it a white sky. Don't try and recover it with something that causes some unnatural coloration for sure. Cropping wise, this is actually a little unbalanced. I like the birds that you're trying to capture, but the fact that you cut off this side of the building but not this side of the building is a little annoying. I wish everything could have been just shifted a little to the right. And then the biggest issue though is this couple here. He's perfectly framed in this doorway, which is kind of neat, but she's not at all. So if you can't fit them both and you can't get that nice even balance, I really would have tried to like have them walk and frame them into that circle, that little anchor of dark space there in the corner. I love the use of perspective. At least you're changing it up from trying to do people side by side and all of that. Really good. The only thing is, like, I wish you'd framed his head so that this line here wasn't going right through it. Right, you have all this space here, this dark, nice contrasty space. Like, he really should be up in this zone, framing wise, if at all possible. I think that would have balanced it a little nicer. And then also the lighting on his face, he should have been looking a little more into the sunlight, if at all possible. He's just getting a little lost in this darkness on that side. Also, all of this stuff, not really that necessary. All this random tree stuff, so maybe just like crop it in a lot tighter, something like that, I think would have been better. But yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for doing a night photo. So many people just don't even try, it seems like. And night is such a great time to make something so different and dramatic usually. Problem here is that the light is no good. They would really need to be looking up into this light to make it usable on their faces. You can barely even see, the brightest thing on them are their arms and foreheads, which doesn't really allow for a lot of connection to who they are. So that's a big problem. Probably would have come at them with a video light from the side or something like that, just to actually light them on their faces a little more. Also looks a touch out of focus, which I know is really, really tough at night, but I love the way you post-processed it, and I love these trees, the way you can kind of just barely make out the silhouette of the trees. The crop is also a little bit tough. I mean, you did a good job getting this V shape here to like draw your eye to them, but you're cutting off, I think, just a little bit too much of their elbows. I would have framed it just a little bit lower. Probably would have just honestly had them walk toward me and then light them with a video light and just use that overhead light as kind of a cool background element. Love everything about this. The light is fairly even and flattering, and their pose, it's a little jumbled, but it's not too bad. At least their hands aren't directly stacked. Biggest problem is this. This is clearly the anchor, sort of in the background of the photo, this rectangular shape here, and it is going right down the middle of their faces. And then you're getting all of this like distracting stuff. Really, to solve that problem, they would need it to be shifted. So this is over in this space, and just frame this stuff out completely. Then you would have been in pretty good shape. But I like the use of a prism or whatever that is here, and I love the use of these vertical lines. It's really cool. Okay, all right, this is kind of neat. It looks like something out of like a stock photo ad or something like that, especially since you can't clearly see anybody's face very well. The biggest thing that jumps out at me is focus. Seems like you're focused on him, and seems like it's just no clear, I don't know what's supposed to be in focus. I feel like you could have stepped in a bunch and then had these guys in focus. I'm not sure what's going on. I like the flare, but all of these like crazy horizontal lines that you have kind of anchoring your background are just chopping their heads off in weird ways that, especially his face right down the middle, that's a bit of a problem. But I love the mood of this photo. The mood is totally right. It's just, you really needed to take like 1 or 2 big steps in. Really, again, glad to see a couple not totally next to each other. That's always refreshing. Biggest problem are the highlights on her nose and her chin. She needed to be looking just a little bit more over her shoulder or looking directly into the sun, kind of like him. Although he looks like he's in shade and she looks like she's not, so I don't know what would have been possible. That's the biggest thing that jumps out at me. The other thing, just compositionally, you're cutting his fingers off in a weird way that I don't love. Her arm is okay, but his fingers are just a little bit weird. I like the mood of this, a little too desaturated for my taste, but I tend to lean towards a little more saturation. I almost think this would have been stronger if it was just the bride by herself. The biggest thing, and you're going to have this issue with all these vertical lines in the background, but this really extra thick big tree going right through her head is a problem. I would have tried to shift it so that they were maybe in between these, a little more even, or like maybe in between a different section that has a slightly bigger opening of less thick trees. This one huge big one is intercepting in her head right in a way that's weird. The other thing is, can't get a clear read on his expression. It's okay, but I would love it if you just swung a little bit around and gotten a little bit more of both of them in the shot. But I like the use of tilt shift and the flowers, and your focus on it is good. It's just a few subtle things would have made this really killer. This photo is kind of amazing. Like this. Becomes more problematic with this frame. It's mostly due to the groom being right in that thick rectangle and it cutting right through his eyes, through his head. That's a big problem. He should have been a little bit lower to the ground, if at all possible, just like stepping. Yeah, I don't know what you could have done, but like he's just not framed at all where he should be, whereas she's like perfect. So that's the biggest issue. A little bit of dead space up here. I don't think that's very necessary, so maybe cropping it more like that would have been a little bit stronger. Nice use of foreground. I really applaud you doing that, and also great use of f/16. That's what's creating this awesome sun star here with all these defined crisp rays. I would assume that's a Nikon, maybe even a 24 at f/16, so that's awesome. Biggest two issues are this and this. You probably could have guessed that by now. It's just intercepting with their heads in ways that are totally problematic, and you can't, you know, edit that out. It's also a touch too faded. These blacks and the shadows are just a little bit too faded. Maybe lower your black point just a little bit, but nice balance of dynamic range and everything else. It's just a little bit too many things intercepting. I wish you could get rid of that. Nice use of indoor lights for sure. I would say their skin tone is a little bit too orangey reddish for sure. Maybe just desaturate orange just a little bit. You balanced her really well in this rectangle. Like her face is, I'm not the best illustrator in the world, but her face is pretty well balanced. His, on the other hand, is not. You're getting this kind of anchor in the background and it's going right through his forehead. So he really would have needed to be a lot lower for this to work properly. But I like that they're back to back. That's always kind of nice. These are a little bit distracting. I wish you could edit those out a little bit. Same with this text, just to clean your focus up a little bit, because I feel like everything, this light too, everything is about these like horizontal rectangles, and all these little spot elements and text are just like distracting me a touch. So maybe get rid of those. Nice take on outdoor light. Now clearly this is a time of day where the sun, yes, it's at an angle, but it's still a little bit unforgiving. So good job just like, hey, just don't face me. I'm not gonna use this tough light on your faces if I can avoid it for this shot. The biggest thing is just framing, all right? They needed to be up like right in this zone. They're just a little unbalanced because you get this like horizon going through here, and it's cutting right through their hands and elbows in a way that's a little bit distracting. Post-processing is also just a little bit desaturated for my tastes. I mean, the anchor in this background is really the green, obviously, the green horizons, and then this nice S shape that's going right through their faces. If they could have at all, in any way, moved over here into this green space, that would have been a little bit more ideal, I think. But I really like the pose overall. Big check mark for that. It's really dynamic with her hand moving, and you know, if he could have been holding her elbow or like doing something with his hand to not have these straight fingers, that would have been a little bit preferable. But really good use of light and really nice post-processing too. I really like all that. A few issues with this. One, I like the moody tones. That's all good. But cropping wise, you just really need to go, you know, like tighter, like this, more center, or maybe like this off to the side. Like really create definition and intention in your compositions. I can't stress that enough. You're also cutting their elbows off like directly directly at the elbows, which is really a problem in my eye. The other thing is the lighting on their face, right? The brightest parts are here. And that's, you know, you can see it just the way I highlight it. It looks funny on people. You don't want the brightest spot to be their nose. And when it's a really cloudy, overcast day, I think a lot of photographers think you can just kind of shoot anywhere because it's all going to be soft and diffused. But there's something absorbing light from them. I don't know what's behind you in this shot. Maybe it's just the ground and it's subtly brighter behind them, but something is creating all this light absorption, and it's just darkening all this stuff on their face, which is a big problem. The other thing is, like, clean this stuff up in the background. Like, that's very unnecessary. Have like a nice clean horizon, and don't have the horizon go, you know, right through their faces. Frame it a little bit further up or a little bit further down, and you would have been in good shape there. Really amazing light. I love this. I don't know what the source is on her face here, but this is really, really interesting. I'd love to know what that is. Very cinematic vibe. Biggest thing that's a distraction is this, her eye being highlighted. I kind of like that in a way, but it's just out of focus enough, and it's just weird enough that it's a little bit distracting. I don't even mind these blown highlights much. It's just her eye. And then the framing is actually really well done. I mean, you got like this line here, this line here. It's not quite hitting her eye. Like that's really good as far as, you know, dealing with a background of a lot of horizontal, vertical lines. Really, really cool. Nice post-processing. A little too desaturated for my taste, but I have a feeling that's what you were going for. Okay, nice moodiness. I love the blue purpley shadow split tone. All that's really, really cool. Biggest issue is, you know, these octagons sort of hitting his head. She's framed pretty well. I don't see an octagon hitting her, but really if they could have both been inside of this orange one, this layer here, I just feel like their entire bodies should have been framed a little bit lower by just a few inches. That's all, just to get them nicely framed in this zone instead of like having all these issues. Cool double exposure. I like the use of out of focus bokeh. That's awesome. Plus, I think you're doing some sort of prism slash, you know, iPhone reflection, which is really, really cool. You're in the ballpark of too much happening, especially with all this stained glass. Like, that's a lot of ornate detail, and just adding a ton of stuff on top of that is a bit of a problem. The biggest thing is they really need to be a lot closer together. Like, really get them in close so that they're framed well in these rectangles. You can see the line goes right through his head, and it mostly goes through her head. If they had been a little bit more in this zone, I think we would have been in a better position. Also, try and correct for this warpiness that's happening. You know, it's a little unlevel, and that becomes very, very apparent when you're shooting up at straight lines or windows. Okay, this one I'm a little torn on because I love the mood that this oven brings, but it's just pulling my eye to the left a little bit more. I feel like if it's possible, just make a weird crop. I can't do it on this iPad, but like make a weird crop, maybe square, I don't know, just a straight square crop, and frame that out if at all possible. Maybe you'd have to crop it here, maybe, yeah. But, you know, then you have this being a bit of an issue. I don't know. I love the moment with the bride. Maybe I would just bring it in like that, honestly, just to bring focus. I mean, her feet and her leg and everything is a really interesting portion of it, but, you know, it's just this oven is too distracting to my eye. But, you know, maybe if you'd step back a little bit more and gotten a clear circle here from one of the burners, and then not lost this edge of the sink. I think that's about it. And then, you know, you do have a weird line going through her body with the anchor of the window in the background. A little bit annoying, but, you know, you're working with what I assume is a candid moment. So, you know, fantastic job with that. If you had control over the situation, I would have fixed it up a bit. Nice to see that you have, you know, full body, and it's truly full. You're not cutting their feet off in any weird way. The biggest thing is lack of moment. I'm not sure, you know, they're just looking at each other awkwardly close. They really need to be closer and just touching heads or engaged a bit better so that you have something a little bit more to connect with. Or, you know, she maybe swing her around and have her face out and then just like lean back into him or something like that would have been a little more interesting. But that's about it. It's just the technically fine, but there's not enough of an emotional connection. You know, even something like this. This photo is very similar to the last one in terms of how close they are to each other, but they're smiling in a way that is very obvious. And you can see that in like the crinkle around the eyes more than anything. I love the use of whatever this is, reflecting and isolating. Biggest thing is I think they need to be a little more intentional in where they're at in the framing. They're kind of in this no man's land of spacing, and or just bring them in dead center, something like that if you have to. Like the other thing is a little bit, it's probably better than having her arm down, but a little bit unflattering in the arm there. Yeah, that's tough to know what would have worked or not looking back. But and then you've brightened, especially his face, like right here, a little bit too much, and hers too, kind of like right here. There's like a subtle hot spot there that's just a little distracting. Both of those should be shifted up like 2 inches to really emphasize their actual face more than anything. I like this moment a lot, and I love the color tones and everything. It's a little desaturated, but the biggest thing is unfortunately just his glasses being nudged up. That's the only thing to my eye, and I actually think that that's kind of sweet, but it's just distracting, that's all. That's the first thing my eye goes. This shape here is fully formed, but this one is lost. You can see how if I connect the dots here, as I'm drawing off, the lines go off, and that's a little bit annoying. I would have liked to see those connect. So just like backing up or framing just to see a little bit more of that shape. But otherwise, really nice, good use of light, and I love the tattoos and the flower hair and all of that. You'll see like a lot of what I'm doing is just breaking down and boldly highlighting the biggest anchors in the background, like all of these clearly bright or contrasted defined lines. Obviously this one here is the windows, and they're framed pretty well within that. There's some problems with where the lines are intercepting with their elbows and hands, but overall kind of neat. The biggest issue is the knees being cut off. I would probably crop it in a little closer. Something more like that, I think, would have been a little bit stronger. All right, nice post-processing, nice shooting down to the ground. This tree is completely unnecessary. I would get rid of that totally. And then it looks like just their expressions, it looks like they're maybe looking off at a friend or somebody who's standing over there and they're reacting to that person. If her head could have been just a little bit more, or just, yeah, looking back in his direction, something like that would have been, I think, a little bit better. Also, her elbow looks a little like it's bending backwards, like her wrist is maybe, if somebody's standing in front, one key thing that I say during a pose is, yeah, okay, so put your hand down, then palm out. So they have their palm out instead of palming back. And that way, whoever's behind can have their hand on top, and it's like a nice hold, and it's not this weird backward bending wrist thing. All right, good job not having them close together. It looks like the balance in your split toning is at 50%, which is giving this like cross-process look. You're getting like this purpley red-blue vibe going. It's okay, I don't love that. I would shift your balance much more toward the highlights if you're using Lightroom. Good job framing him out. There's just not quite enough going on though. And I'm getting these weird lines going through her body. I wish she could have been a small step that direction or something like that, so this background line wasn't going right through her arm. But beautiful reaction from her. I love that, and I like that they're mirroring each other even though they can't see each other. That's kind of neat. I feel like he's getting a little bit, I love the use of this washiness, but I'm losing him just a little bit too much. Yeah, if that could have just been moved over, I don't know, just enough to see his face a little more clearly, we would have been in good shape. But I love the use of negative space. I think compositionally you could have, maybe cropped it in a little tighter like this. Yeah, but that's about it. Otherwise, really, really interesting photo. Okay, mostly issues with background lines, and I think the biggest defined anchor is this line here, and it's going right through his head, so that's a big problem. You did a good job balancing this so that it's, her head isn't cut off in any weird way, but just the top of his head is a big issue. Also, I'm not sure why you went vertical. You probably could crop it in a little bit more. The light on them is again, like, it's soft, but the brightest spots are the forehead and nose, his nose as well, so that's a bit of an issue. They needed just a little bit better defined light on them. I like all the foreground stuff happening. That's really cool. That's all good. Maybe crop it in a little bit tighter. This woman looks strangely like my sister. Nice tilt shift, I think. Is that what's going on? Or maybe some sort of like lens baby, something. They look just a touch too pinkish and red in their skin tone. Maybe go a little bit more green with it. And that's about it. I mean, yeah, I probably would have cropped it in to be more like this, so that the crop is right around where the fingers stop. Here, it's okay, but it's a little bit unnecessary. Okay, really nice moment. Got Good job getting this background shape. These nice lines here really anchor it well. It's just, this is the original crop. I would have cropped it in a little bit tighter if at all possible. Try and keep your fingers in there, right on that edge. Would have been a nice balancing point. I think this one is a little bit too faded in the shadows. And there's just too many little twigs and things, if you look closely, like intercepting with the guy's head in a way that's a bit of a problem. It's also intercepting with their arms in a way that's a bit of a problem. And they're a little bit too backlit, which is a bit of a problem. So I probably would have actually walked them inside there and shot with them with their backs against this, or shot with you standing where they are, and all that light coming from this little opening, lighting them straight on, probably would have been really interesting and beautiful. I do applaud the use of framing, and I see what you're going for. It's just not quite coming together. Immediately, if you have a guy this tall, you want to avoid hunching over like that to get him interacting with her. Like, have him do the splits, have him sitting down somewhere, or anything to avoid the hunch that's strong. I do like the sun flare coming through there. Biggest problem, aside from the hunchiness, is all the tree noise intercepting with their heads. There's no clear separation between their silhouettes and the silhouettes of the trees. So framing could have been a little bit stronger, but I love the flare coming through that little, right beside them. It's really cool. I love the black and white, really nice. I would check the fade. It looks a little bit too faded. If you like it this faded, make sure your colors are this faded as well. There's a tendency for, when you're editing in black and white, for it to add a little bit of fade, and if standalone, it might look really good, but if you put it side by side with other photos, color photos, the fade looks too much. But I'm assuming you were using it to make up for some high ISO grain or something like that, which is fine. I do that all the time. It's just a little too grainy, especially right here on his face and her arm. But I love the moment, I love the framing, and I even love the lighting. It looks like pretty tough light, and you got away with it. I like the use of off-camera flash, awesome. Biggest thing is they really need to be like over in this zone, somewhere like this. You have all of these intercepting lines right through his head, right through her head. It's no good. Plus, what are their hands doing? Their hands need to have some sort of action or something happening. Hand in pocket, hand holding the dress, something like that. So it's mostly just framing them over here and having something to do with their hands. The other thing is you're kind of cutting his legs off in a slightly weird way, but I like the fact that you have the camera really low to the ground. That automatically makes a bit of like a more epic hero perspective to things. This one, it's a bit of a problem. The corner here intercepting with his head is an issue. Everybody else is framed really well, other than her hand a little bit and his hand a little bit, but this corner being one of the brightest spots intercepting right through his head is a big problem. So I would probably not have him in the shot at all if possible. This is a little bit over processed. It just looks like you tried to bring back the highlights a little bit too strong. You're getting into HDR territory just a little bit. Just let it go. It doesn't have to be perfectly balanced dynamic range all the time. Yeah, it's just worked a little hard. Plus, I think you maybe brightened his face or something in their skin tone a little bit too obviously. But really nice job framing the horizon lines here, so that their heads are balanced in it. That looks really good. And even their hands look pretty good. I wish that wasn't going through their elbows quite so much. But otherwise, obviously I love center weighted compositions, and I love how well they're balanced in between the two sides there. Yeah, cool. Kind of have this shape going on. Meow. This cool triangle shape. And it's got her nicely framed, but it's intercepting directly with his body and her face in a way that's kind of weird. You did a good job not getting the background line going through their head, but this is a big problem here with the way the road is framed. Let me back up a few. Other than that, though, the dynamic range is really good. The post-processing is really good, and I love the pose in the moment here. That's a really nice shape there. Wish his hand was maybe in his pocket, and that's about it. I mean, I think you could have cropped it a little tighter too, something like this. Biggest issue is this road, yeah, this side of the road intercepting with his head, so, or his body. Got a little bit of a commercial photo. Biggest issue is his hand. Those straight fingers, like he really should be interacting with the glass, something like that. The light though is really nice. It's a little bit bright on his face. It's not too bad. You know, makeup or something would help, go a long way. He maybe already had some on, I don't know, but other than that, it's a really nice frame. I maybe would have gone a touch warmer with the post processing. It's a little cool tone for me, but you know, that's just my preference. Nice use of you know, framing his face. You did a pretty good job. But, you know, there's so much happening with all these vertical lines and this doorway and everything. Like, there's just no clear avenue of where to look. I don't know if I'm supposed to be looking at the background or their faces, and I'm assuming you want me looking sort of in this direction. So just a darker background I think would have gone a long way here. There's just too many vertical lines intercepting with their heads in ways that are problematic. I mean, you almost have it balanced like perfectly, but see how dark it is here? And I'm just getting like separation in the background with where his face is. So that's the biggest issue. I like the where you have them cropped is pretty good. It's nice that their eyes are completely sharp, real good. I'm assuming that was tilt shift. This one just really needs to be cropped in more. The action in the moment is all about the kid and the girl. This girl over here isn't really necessary. I like that she has a cookie, but like this is really where the action is, right here. Make it a lot stronger. Nice job balancing his face in that blue background. That's really good. And her face is pretty well balanced with this dress, this dark dress here. Wish the dress would have been a little bit longer maybe. You could have had like a dark blue all the way down, but you know, yeah, I would just purely crop it in a little bit tighter. Nice lighting. I'd be curious what was going on there with the light. All right, amazing moment. This stuff always big hit, big seller. Whenever people are just mirroring each other and laughing that hard, that's awesome. There's just not quite enough dress. It's getting lost too much. So if you're clipping like that, I would just cropped it in a lot tighter like this. Maybe add a little bit more fill light in post. I'm assuming he's wearing black jeans, but this looks like just a chunk of his arm was cut out. It's a little bit too dark. I want to see a little more detail just to see that it's pants. But other than that, I love it. Really nice. Nice use of flare. Just a few problems with where things are cut off. Namely his hand here, his wrist being cut off right at the shirt. I assume that's a he. It's kind of hard to tell. But nice use of framing with this. This is all good. It's just not quite interesting enough. Like I probably would have put them right on the edge a little bit more. Something like this maybe. And I think a 16:9 crop would have gone a long way. Something, you know, something more like, well, I'm not cutting their arms off in the right spot, but you get the drift. Maybe something more like this below her hand. Yeah. It's a cool shot though. Nice use of flare. Awesome way to do a double exposure. You don't see new takes on that very often, and this seems pretty refreshing to me. Again, I would just crop it in a little bit tighter, maybe something more like this. And probably that's about it. I mean, the lighting on her face isn't super good, but I also don't know if that's even supposed to be the focus. I think her dancing is supposed to be the focus, so that might be okay. But maybe would have just had her look a little bit more over her shoulder into the sunlight. Maybe. I don't even know if I would do that. Nice toning and everything. Biggest problem is the horizon going right through his head. This one's not so bad. Like his entire head should have been balanced right in this zone. Instead, we have all this extra hair on top. That's just a little bit distracting. Good use of light, for sure. Probably could have brought it in a little bit closer. Something like a lot closer. Something like that, I think would have been a bit stronger. You'd still get everything about the atmosphere and the environment. It just would have drawn your eye even more distinctly. This is really cool. If you could step down a little bit lower with your camera and frame them more like up here, I think that would have been a little bit stronger. But otherwise, good job. I mean, it's a nice, beautiful scene, and there are no weird interceptions that are totally problematic. It would have been nice to see the guy's silhouette a little bit more if he was looking at her, or looking way over his other shoulder just to see an outline of his face. Big issue here, the window. Lines going right through her face. Nothing is, these are window frames. They need to frame things nice and clear. And that frame is going right through her face. This woman is framed pretty well. Not too bad, but the bride, or whoever this is, that's the issue. But I like the use of like getting some of this stuff in there. That's really cool. Just gives some sense of context. Really cool double exposure. I feel like all the action is in the circle stuff here, and this is totally unnecessary. So I would almost square crop it in really tight. Let me back up there. Yeah, something like that I think would be much stronger. And that's about it. Really nice use of this subtle framing here. I really like that with whatever the object is. I assume that's a tire or something. I don't know what that was. So the biggest problem is this line or this shape from the window is cutting them off a little bit too low, right? Like, I really wish that they had, I don't know what I just did. I really wish they had a, or you had framed just a little bit lower. Obviously that would have been impossible to predict with a moving car. You have no idea what size the window is going to be from the car coming in. I mean, it's awesome. I would totally deliver it, but that's my most harsh critique. The other thing is that this part of this car, like I would have darkened this if at all possible, just like darken that bright car, because it's just pulling my eye a little bit to the right. Good job making somebody look flattering and beautiful even in really difficult lighting. Obviously I assume this is light that you set up from a projector or something like that. I love the color tones. That's a really nice transition up to like actual skin tones. That's all really good. Well, yeah, biggest thing is just composition. I think you would have been a little better off having a little more intentionality. Like she's already off center. Like really force us to have some play with where our eye is looking. Create some more negative space and then just fill it in with her, right? This basically, all I'm saying is this whole part of the frame feels a little unbalanced and unnecessary. Good job framing them in a nice clean composition. I like the post-processing. I'd be curious what you used for that. The biggest thing is I'm seeing mostly just the back of his, top part of his hair that's thinning out a little bit. So I would have loved to see a little bit more of his expression. And then her fingers are also just straight, and you need some sort of dynamic in any fingers. Even though they're hugging, it's like her fingers are really stiff. But good job with her expression and nice job with framing and post-processing. All right, another trees shot. So I think just the crop a little tighter would have been a little bit stronger, and then if only you'd frame them a little bit more in this section, this brighter spot behind them. That feels like where they should have gone, or that section where it's super, super dark, just to create a nice pop and contrast. Like her dress and hair is kind of bleeding into this zone, and that's right where it's transitioning from bright to dark, or from bright to dark. So yeah, they just needed subtly better placement, either left or right, and you would have been in good shape. Way to go with the double exposure in a way that you don't often see. I assume it's a double exposure, if not it's a reflection. The biggest thing is that they're clearly a bit larger, and this is not the most flattering body type to do a silhouette with. So help them out a little bit in post if you need to. The other thing is, they need to be just a little bit closer together, I think, just a small step. They don't have to have eye contact, get them right there. But also don't have their nose touching. With a silhouette, sometimes they're so close that their nose is touching and you get a weird, like, bridged nose effect, which could be a problem. But I like that it's a black and white as well. It seems kind of cool. All right, this just needs a little bit of cleanup. I mean, you're cropping his knee-ish off a little. I probably would have gone like here with it if possible. Kind of hard to crop on this iPad. And then the other thing is I would actually clean up all these tiny little sticks. If this is something that's going on Instagram or anything like that, like just content aware in Lightroom, all these simple little sticks, a little bit, take 5 seconds. All right, cool. Looks like sort of like a stock photo or something like that. Biggest issue is her hand being cut off there. I like that you have a clear read of her expression, but it's kind of annoying that I'm losing her face and her chin a little. Same with this guy. At least I feel like I should be looking at this person, but I feel like I should also be looking at these other two people, and it's just a little bit lost. Nice framing with this, not intercepting their heads in any way that's too awkward, but just, slightly framed down, I think would have really helped cutting off those hands. Interesting lighting. I'd be curious if that's off-camera flash or if that's just a little pocket of light coming through there. Probably would have liked to see her looking back over her shoulder. I don't know how to draw that really well, but maybe looking back that way. I like that there's movement and kind of dynamic in her body. This looks a little like hot spotted in a way, but other than that, really nice framing overall. It's cool. I think the biggest thing is just the lighting on her face. You did a good job not having any clouds intercepting in any weird way, so that's good, but she probably should have been looking a little more over her shoulder so that the sun wasn't quite so unflattering on her body. Also, you could probably crop it in a little bit tighter, something like that. I like the post-processing on that. I'd be curious what you used. Good job with the vertical lines of the waterfall and like framing them in. They're a little unbalanced. I wish they had been just a smidge over that way so you had an even amount of white space between them. Yeah, if they had just been over just a little bit, and then you probably could have just cropped it in like completely that way to get it balanced. Yeah, it really just needs to be a little bit tighter in the crop. But otherwise, feels like Iceland. I assume maybe that's where it was. I don't know. Cool. This one I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky about. Like, with such few elements in any scene, everything, you know, the fewer items you have, the more everything in it really matters. And these lines going between them in the background not being perfectly balanced is kind of annoying. And then the lighting on them, a little unflattering. Probably would have had his hand in the pocket, maybe her hand holding a piece of the dress, something like that. But otherwise, really nice. All right, way to go, kind of making an interesting, layered, complicated composition. I like that. It's just, you didn't quite pull it off with all these anchoring background lines, cropping them in weird spots. There's just too many lines. There's just not a clear sense of framing. And you lost his nose here. She's really well framed in this little sliver. I love that. But yeah, there's just all these drawers and all this empty space and so many horizontal lines just make it a very, I don't know quite where to look, which in one way I really like, but in another way I think is a little unflattering or a little problematic. But the light actually is pretty flattering overall, but I feel like maybe she should have been looking in that window as well. So that she was getting hit with direct light. But I don't know, he's a little too bright and she's a little underexposed. Looked like he had to work pretty hard to like balance them. And yeah, I mean, the light's really good on him here. It's just, yeah, all sorts of distracting elements in the framing. That's really the bottom line. Yeah, the tree's not quite big enough, you know? These really dark defined tree is cutting their head off in a way that's a bit of a problem. Probably just would have had them back up against the tree completely or framed somewhere in the grass or something lower. Yeah, the tree is just not going to work, but good post-processing, good balance, pretty good lighting. Yeah, it's great otherwise. Nice job with a little bit of foreground interest. Probably would have cropped this stuff out completely, just get rid of that. So maybe just crop it in a little tighter. The pose is a little stiff and forced feeling. Maybe had them interacting or looking down. He has a floating hand here, which is a bit of an issue. Yeah, you just need to get them to engage with each other a little bit more naturally in a variety of ways. But otherwise, I really like the concept. All right, good job using like purpley blue and not having it look like crap. Really, I mean that sincerely. Good job with that. She still looks really, really great. The light on her face is a little too highlight here. You know, her nose is just too bright. But otherwise, it's really nice. Interesting photo. Too many dominant background horizons intercepting them. Like they really, you need their faces to be here in like one of these black spots. And they are just clipped. I mean, they would have been, but you know, you just didn't quite get the framing right with his head especially. But I love everything else. I mean, I wish the chandelier had been a little bit lower so it was also framed nicely in this black patch. That would have been kind of nice. It's kind of cut off here in a weird way. But otherwise, I love all the audience members and the vibe and the whole, you know, tone of the area is the atmosphere is really nice. The other thing is the lighting is unflattering on her. You know, you're getting his shoulder clipping her face in a way that's like creating a dark shadow in a weird spot for her. And his face is completely different brightness and color than her face. So just some lighting and framing issues, but otherwise really nice use of wide lens. Nice, I would probably actually get rid of the plane or whatever that satellite was for this shot, maybe crop it in a little bit closer, and that's about it. This is a little dark and jarring for me. Maybe brighten that up. I don't know how else you get rid of it other than, you know, moving your light during the shot somehow. And you could also probably darken up these edge bushes just a little bit. You want all your focus to go right to the couple and just get rid of anything that makes that a problem. Good use of off-camera flash. They're not interacting in a way, like he looks a little bit too disengaged. He needs to be more involved with her. Plus his floating hand is no good. Then all of this building, I wish that wasn't there. That should be just pure sky if at all possible. And then you have too many distracting buildings here. Like there's just too much going on in the background there. You would have needed to get a lower, more extreme angle or do something to just frame them in the dominant lines of this cool bridge. Like these are really, really cool lines, and I like the blue color. Like I love the shape that is being created here. There's just too much interfering with actually pulling that off. Nice. I don't like how his knees cut off, but I like actually, you know, maybe you could crop it even tighter, something like that. But I like her expression, and I even like how he's the exact opposite, but I don't know if it quite works. I don't know, it's funny. I like the post-processing on this, and it's a cool vibe, but you're just like, you're also cropping her wrist off exactly. It's mostly to do with like the lower portion here. I think something like that would have been a little bit stronger with the framing. Nice light. And I would love to know what you used for post-processing. Really interesting shot. I mean, obviously his eyes are very striking, so good job highlighting that. It's really, really good. I like everything's happening. I would like to see a little bit more of his wrist or hand maybe, or maybe just crop it in tighter. But otherwise, really nice. Looks a little too faded with the shadow. Really cool framing. Could probably bring it in even tighter, something like that. And then the light on her nose is a big, big problem. She really should have been looking more into the sunlight that way, sort of like how he is. And I think he would have been in good shape there. Nice sense of atmosphere. Biggest problem is no clear-cut composition. There's too many dominant lines intercepting with people's faces and bodies in ways that are a problem. This person here is probably not even necessary. If you could have framed everything a little bit, if you step more to the right and framed all of this more perfectly centered in the actual mirror, I think you would have been in better shape. I have no idea what actually would have been capable in real life. So that's it. That concludes this. I think we hit right around an hour. So I hope you didn't find that painful and tedious. I hope you found it interesting. You probably had a lot of recurring themes that you picked up on. And yeah, just post anything in the comments thread if you have any questions or insights. And I'll open up for another one very, very soon. So thanks, everyone. Bye.